The story of the Knights Hospitaller does not begin with treasure. It begins with a single hospital in Jerusalem, created around the year 1080 by a group of monks who cared for Christian pilgrims. They were not soldiers at first. They were not wealthy, feared, or powerful. They were caregivers. But when the Crusades exploded across the Middle East, the Hospitallers transformed into something Europe had never seen before, a religious order that combined military strength, political influence, and a financial system so advanced that historians today compare it to the world's first multinational bank. This transformation did not happen quickly. It developed across centuries of conflict, diplomacy, and strategic thinking. But the result was extraordinary. The Knights Hospitaller built a treasury that rivaled kingdoms, operated financial networks across continents, and became the trusted guardians of wealth for nobles, merchants, and even rival rulers. This is the forgotten financial empire of medieval Europe. And in this video, we are going to uncover how they built it, how they protected it, and why it eventually disappeared from world history. When the First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099, pilgrims began pouring into the Holy Land in enormous numbers. Many arrived sick, injured, or robbed along the way. To protect them, the monks of the hospital reorganized themselves as a military order, and in 1113, Pope Paschal II officially recognized them as the Knights of the Hospital of St. John. With this recognition came something rare in medieval times: the right to receive donations directly from kings, nobles, and the church without interference. Land, gold, agricultural estates, castles, and whole towns were gifted to them across Europe. By the year 1200, the Hospitallers owned properties in France, Spain, Italy, England, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Middle East. These properties, called commanderies, generated steady income through taxes, rents, and agricultural production. Records from the 13th century show that some commanderies produced revenue equal to small kingdoms, with the wealth flowing back to their headquarters in Jerusalem and later Rhodes. This steady stream of income became the foundation of their treasury. They were not only warriors, they were financial administrators managing one of the largest land portfolios in medieval Europe. What made the Hospitaller treasury special was not only its size, but its security. Medieval Europe was a dangerous place. Roads were risky, robbers were common, and transporting gold was a dangerous mission. But the Knights Hospitaller created a solution far ahead of its time. They developed a system similar to modern banking transfers. A pilgrim in England could deposit money at a Hospitaller commandery, receive a written receipt, and then travel to the Holy Land without carrying any gold. When he reached Jerusalem, Rhodes, or Acre, he could present the document and receive the same amount of money from the local Hospitaller treasury. This system reduced theft, encouraged travel, and built trust in the knights as honest financial intermediaries. Historians refer to these written documents as early versions of letters of credit, a tool that would later be used by the Templars and Italian banking families. But the Hospitallers operated this system decades earlier. This alone made them essential to medieval finance. The order's wealth grew even more after the fall of the Templars in 1307. When King Philip IV of France destroyed the Knights Templar to seize their money, the Church declared that most Templar properties should be transferred to the Knights Hospitaller. This transfer took years, and many lands were sold, stolen, or lost in the legal chaos. But the Hospitallers still gained vast territories. In some regions, their income doubled. They inherited armories, estates, and most importantly, financial contracts owed by European nobles. In several cases, kings who once owed money to the Templars had to repay the Hospitallers instead. This sudden expansion did not make the Hospitallers Europe's richest order. The Church still held more wealth, but it made them one of the most influential. They had stable revenue streams across dozens of countries, a network of safe houses for travelers, and a reputation for honesty that few institutions could match. Their treasury became so important, that even Muslim rulers occasionally negotiated financial terms with them during conflicts. But the knights were not only bankers. They were also naval commanders. After losing Jerusalem, the order relocated to Rhodes in 1309. From this island, they created one of the most effective naval forces in the eastern Mediterranean. Their ships protected Christian merchants from pirates, transported soldiers and supplies, and escorted valuable cargo. In return, merchants paid fees, and European states offered subsidies. Trade records from the 14th and 15th centuries show that Hospitaller fleets escorted shipments of spices, grain, metals, and fabrics. Because piracy was rampant, especially near the coasts of Anatolia and the Levant, shipowners were willing to pay high prices for the knights' protection. This revenue fed their treasury and funded the massive fortress they built on roads one of the strongest in medieval Europe. Their fleet also allowed them to move gold, documents, and supplies with greater security than most kingdoms. The combination of military power and financial networks made the Hospitallers the backbone of Mediterranean commerce. Their financial skill also showed in how they invested their wealth. Unlike many medieval powers, the Hospitallers did not hoard gold in a single vault. They diversified their resources. They reinvested income into agriculture, shipyards, fortifications, hospitals, and diplomatic missions. They lent money to nobles, kings, and even rival religious orders. They negotiated trade privileges with Venice, Genoa, and Catalan merchants. Surviving records show that by the 15th century, the Hospitaller Treasury on Rhodes managed incomes for more than 2,000 estates across Europe. Their accounting was precise, written in detailed ledgers, and enforced through inspections. Modern scholars studying these records describe them as remarkably sophisticated, matching the standards of Italian city-states like Florence and Genoa, which later became financial centers. This efficiency is a major reason their order survived longer than the Templars. The Hospitallers followed strict rules to avoid corruption, and their economic system was difficult for any king to absorb or steal. But their power could not last forever. In 1522, the Ottoman Empire, led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, launched a massive siege on Rhodes. The Hospitallers fought bravely, but were outnumbered. After 6 months of battle, they surrendered and were allowed to leave with their archives, treasury, and surviving knights. This decision by Suleiman was unusual. Most defeated enemies were enslaved or executed. But the Ottomans understood the value of the order's financial and diplomatic network. Destroying them would anger European powers unnecessarily. So the Hospitallers were exiled instead of eliminated. After wandering for years, the order finally settled in Malta in 1530, granted by Emperor Charles V. There they rebuilt their navy and their economy. Malta was small, but its position in the Mediterranean was strategic. The knights transformed it into a fortress island where merchants could trade under Hospitaller protection. Revenue from port fees, grain storage, ship repairs, and international trade strengthened their treasury once again. Malta became the center of their most famous victory, the Great Siege of 1565. With only about 6,000 defenders, the knights held off an Ottoman invasion force estimated between 30,000 and 40,000 soldiers. Their win shocked Europe and elevated their reputation as defenders of Christianity. But behind the military victory was a financial reality. The Hospitallers had spent decades preparing, using their revenue to build fortifications, buy cannons, train soldiers, and store food. This was a rare example where financial discipline directly shaped the outcome of a major historical event. After the siege, European kings increased their donations. Pilgrims increased travel to Malta, and merchants paid more to use the island's protected harbor. For a time, the Knights Hospitaller became wealthier than ever. But the economic landscape of Europe was changing. The rise of nation-states, the decline of the crusading ideal, and the shift of global trade toward the Atlantic slowly weakened the order's influence. By the 1700s, the order faced financial trouble. Colonial trade in the Americas and Asia overshadowed Mediterranean commerce. European monarchies grew stronger and contributed fewer donations. Some hospitaller estates struggled with poor harvests and rising taxes. When the French Revolution broke out, the order suffered a massive blow. In 1792, France confiscated all hospitaller property within its borders. This was devastating because France had been their largest source of income. Without that revenue, their treasury collapsed. Only 2 years later, in 1798, Napoleon invaded Malta during his campaign to Egypt. The knights could not resist him. They were forbidden by their own rules from fighting other Christians. Napoleon seized their fortress, their ships, and whatever remained of their treasury. And with that, the financial empire of the Knights Hospitaller vanished almost overnight. Some members fled to Russia, where Tsar Paul I briefly tried to revive the order, but it never regained the wealth or influence it had once held. Today, the Knights Hospitaller still exist in a different form. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a humanitarian organization operating hospitals, medical programs, and relief missions in more than 100 countries. They no longer command fortresses, militaries, or massive treasury networks. But their early achievements still stand as one of the most remarkable financial stories of medieval Europe. Their landholdings stretched across continents. Their banking system reduced crime and encouraged travel. Their naval convoys protected trade. Their treasury funded wars, hospitals, and diplomacy. And for nearly 700 years, the Knights Hospitaller demonstrated how a religious order could become a global financial power without losing its original mission of service. Their legacy reminds us that money, faith, and power have always been intertwined, and that the institutions controlling wealth often shape history in ways people forget. If you enjoyed this deep dive into financial history, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who loves hidden stories, and subscribe to Retro Finance Files for more dramatic research-backed explorations of how money shaped our world. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten financial empires, secret institutions, and the stories that textbooks never teach. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.